Profit Designers, we have been producing the Profit by Design podcast now almost 3 years with a weekly episode. And for the first time, we are going into our vault and going back through our most popular episodes and re-releasing them. I think you're going to find a lot of value from these conversations. And I believe these are some of the most important conversations for helping you move your business forward. One of the things that you may not know is that when I record the Profit by Design podcast, I really think about our clients and our Better Business, Better Life program at Tap the Potential and what is going to serve them well in what we're supporting them in doing in creating a business that gives you time for what matters most and allows you to have more money in your bank account than ever. Every one of these episodes is chosen with that in mind. So we are on a brief hiatus at the Profit by Design podcast to allow me to get a little bit of downtime and much needed R&R in addition to some big things we're cooking up at Tap the Potential. So our team needed time to focus on the upcoming Better Business, Better Life Summit. You'll be hearing more details about that very soon. And I am working on the audible version of the 4-week vacation. So enjoy these episodes, and I will be back with you very soon.
If you have a good decision-making process and people understand both what's the big picture strategy and the day-to-day tactics, they can be empowered to make decisions, and everything doesn't have to come back to you, the owner.
You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling. I'm the business psychologist, the author of the 4-week vacation and the How to Hire the Best series, as well as the founder of Tap the Potential, where we coach entrepreneurs like you to design sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. Because after all, we believe work supports life, not the other way around. Weekly on the Profit by Design podcast, we bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. Get started on your journey with us by downloading the training so many entrepreneurs are talking about right now, how to make your time worth $10,000 an hour at tapthepotential.com/10K. If you are wondering if you are on track to creating your highly profitable, great place to work that's going to allow you to take a 4-week vacation, I want to remind you about the opportunity to take our assessment at tapthepotential.com/assessment. You will get feedback with respect to the areas of your business that need strengthening in order for you to build that great team, that profitable company, and have the systems in place that allow you to have some freedom and take some good time off in the coming year. So that being said, I am excited about our guest that we have joining us today. This is a good friend of mine and colleague, Rico. She is the owner of CFO On Speed Dial, and she is a fellow Profit First professional. In keeping with our theme of designing for profit in 2020, Christine is going to join us today to shed some light on things we may not be thinking about in our business that have a pretty significant impact on whether or not we're building a profitable, sustainable business. So with that, I want to read you Christine's bio. Rico is a financial consultant, business growth expert, and social entrepreneur who got her start in financial management while keeping the books for Cooperative Home Care Associates in the Bronx, New York, more than 20 years ago. The cooperative was then a startup and is now the country's largest worker-owned business. At CFO On Speed Dial, Christine and her team help business owners set and reach financial goals and build companies that are making healthy, sustainable food products, installing renewable energy systems, and growing high-impact consulting businesses. Christine works with companies to improve profitability, craft expansion plans grounded in the company's overall goals and vision, and get the cash that businesses need to grow. She is on a mission to close the gender revenue gap by helping women-owned companies accelerate growth. So with that, let's join our conversation with Christine. So Christine, I am excited to get to talk with you today on the podcast. We have some big topics to get into that I think are really going to be enlightening for our profit designers.
Sabrina, I'm so happy to be here. It's great to see you, great to talk with you, and I just am really excited about what we have to talk about today.
Yeah. So on the Profit by Design podcast, we've been having lots of conversations here at the beginning of the new year around designing for profit. And you having your business CFO on Speed Dial, you are very tuned into sustainable businesses and driving profit in sustainable business. So you're bringing a perspective to the podcast that I don't think we've covered yet, though. So that's what I'm intrigued to get into with you. So I just want to tell our profit designers how I reached out to you at this time. You published a blog post a couple of months back, and it had an image in it that I cannot get out of my head. And it is about the percentage of revenue that women-owned businesses are responsible for. And it's a very small percentage. I'm going to ask you to talk about that in just a minute. But it struck a chord with me because it is an issue for women business owners, women entrepreneurs. It's also an issue, though, that I see with our male business owners that we work with. And it really comes down to running the business in such a way that you're barely breaking even and you don't have the opportunity to grow and scale. So I want you to talk about the percentage that you cited in that article about the percentage of women-owned businesses and how that's growing, and then the percentage of revenue that they're responsible for.
Sure. So most of this comes from the American Express report on the state of women-owned businesses that they publish annually. And last year's report came out in the fall of 2019. There are a few other reports that show similar statistics, but American Express breaks it down by gender, by age, by race, and does a really good job of showing kind of the effects of small privately held companies in the U.S. economy overall, and then how women are in particular contributing and experiencing this. And so the good news is one of those good news, bad news things. The good news is that for the past 2 years, 1,800 new women-led companies have been created every day in the United States.
Wow.
It's tremendous, tremendous growth. And African-American women are launching more than anyone else. So it's not just one kind of business, one kind of, or, race or ethnic group that's doing this. It's kind of across the board. Women are like, let's go. We're going to start a business. The bad news is that the companies led by women are much smaller than male-led companies. So only 8% of U.S. employment in the private sector is from women-led companies, even though we now make up 42% of all companies.
Okay, so let's wrap our heads around that. Women-owned companies make up 42% of the privately held companies in the United States.
Right.
And they're responsible for what percentage of employment?
8% of employment.
8%.
And it's worse when you look at revenue.
Okay, so tell us about that.
Women brought in 4.2% of all revenue from privately held companies in the U.S.
4.2%.
Right. So that's the image that you had in your brain. So there's the big circle.
Yes.
Which represents the universe of all privately held companies. There's a smaller circle that represents, that we have 8% of the employment. And there's a teeny little circle that represents that women-led companies have 4.2% of all revenue.
Yeah. Okay. So this personally sticks in my head because when I was in graduate school, the University of Texas at Austin, I had the opportunity to participate as a researcher in looking at the wage gap among the professors at the university. And it was a comparison of male-female professors. And it was startling to me to go through department after department and to see the tremendous disparity among tenured professors, male and female, same years of experience, and the earnings. In that time, one of the things I took from that was I'm going to own my own business. I am not going to fall into this trap. So that is why I get personally charged up about this, because I think, if we are setting out to be entrepreneurs ourselves and we are trying to break through wage disparity and salary disparity, and then we put ourselves into our own glass ceiling, what's going on?
Yeah, it's more like a whole glass jar because you're constrained in many ways.
So what's your take on this, Christine? What do you think is underneath all of this?
Well, there's a couple of things. When I first thought about it, I was like, well, it makes sense if the women are starting new businesses, if so many new businesses are out there, and that's why we've gotten to 42% of the total number of firms, then many of these firms are early. They're just in their first couple of years and they need time to grow. However, while that is true, it's also true that women-owned firms start with revenues 34% below male-owned firms. This comes from a different study. It's from JP Morgan Chase from the same year, from 2019. Female business owners have 46% of revenues from male-owned firms in San Antonio, Texas. It's different in different places, right? Whereas in Miami, women-owned firms have 85% of the revenue of male-owned firms, but nowhere are we at parity. So even in the very first year of operations, women-owned firms are smaller than male-owned firms. That's a one-to-one comparison. So it's not just like I'm comparing my 2-year-old company to one that's been around for 20 years. It's 1-year-old firms, women-led firms are already smaller. So we start smaller, we grow slower, we don't have as much access to capital. This is well researched. And all of that means you don't have money to grow, because if you have a small company with low profitability, then you don't have as much money to invest in marketing, in team members, in new distribution channels. It takes money to grow. So if you start with a small company and you're not getting outside financing, where are you going to get the money to grow?
Right.
You have to have deep pockets, which lots of people don't have, or it's just going to be really, really slow.
Yeah, and slow is not a good way to grow. It becomes more and more challenging because there's a psychological toll that happens to us when we are in survival mode for an extended period of time.
Right.
My feeling from talking, and I see this in male entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs, is it is moving beyond the barely breaking even mindset. That especially when it comes to pricing and setting appropriate pricing. So what I see going on is business owners as a whole are not comfortable pricing to grow. So they're not creating the gross profit margin that they need to be able to have a profit or to reinvest in the company or to be able to bring on team. And especially I see this in the 100, 200, 300,000 revenue range. But I think it starts there and it continues as the business grows, unless there's a mindset shift and an understanding about what money needs to do in the business.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And it goes back also to why you start your business. So I tell the story on myself. When I started my business, I was a classic mompreneur. I had stayed home for a year when my kids were very little. And then my family agreed that nobody wanted me to go back to work full time. I had previously worked for a national organization. I was traveling. I was commuting over an hour when I was home. It was just not a good setup for being a mom. And I had one of those pivotal days when my kid was sick and I was an hour away. And I was like, how am I going to get there? So I started my business with the goal of doing something interesting that would keep my brain active and still be home at 3 p.m. to get my kids after school when my daughter was in kindergarten. And so when you start a business like that, you're not starting with a big grandiose business plan. You're kind of happy with incremental growth. I was happy with incremental growth as long as my kids were getting more independent, and that gave me more time. And it took a while before I was really serious about turning it into a company that would sustain more than just me. So it goes back to where you start. I have worked and mentored one woman who has this great line of products. And when I first met with her as part of this mentoring group that I worked with as part of the We NYC, the City of New York's Women's Entrepreneurship Program, when I asked her about her goals for the year, she was like, well, it would be great to make 20,000. And I was like, that is not a serious goal. That's a hobby, which is great. But if you could really make all the money you could imagine in this business, what would you do? And she came up with this literally $1 million dream. And I was like, that's your dream. That's what you have to focus on. Because if you stay with a focus on that $20,000 goal, that would be nice this year, you're never going to see your company grow. And the PS on that is that her products are now being carried in all of the Title IX stores in the country. So I'm like so proud and so excited. But really, you have to have fuel for your vision. You can't think small and be happy with what you have and look for incremental growth. Like on a year-to-year basis or month-to-month basis, incremental growth may be the reality, but you have to fuel that growth with a dream of like, where are you really going? And that's why the foundational piece that I do with all of my work is to ask people to think about that destination. Where are you going? Because if you don't have a big dream that you're aiming for, it's really hard to get outside of the day-to-day and kind of what you think you can accomplish next.
I can't agree more with that. That is so true. And you asked her a powerful question. Do you remember which that question was? You just said it. I just want to highlight that question for our listeners.
I asked her about what her big dream was and where she could see herself in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and what would the business accomplish?
Yeah. And the piece that really caught my attention is the impact. What impact would it have if your business is bigger? And that has, for myself, with Tap the Potential, that's been a powerful thing to think about, is to recognize this business is no longer meant to just serve and take care of me. It is here for our team members. It is here for our clients. It is here for our impact in the greater world through the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think that having a clear idea of your purpose, obviously, that's really motivating for me as well. And that is something I look for in everyone that I work with. It's like, what is your purpose? Why are we doing this? And purpose beyond, business success or revenue growth. I really look for a social purpose and an impact that can be quantified in kind of what is the work that we're doing? Why are we doing this?
So for you, are you comfortable sharing what your vision is for CFO on Speed Dial and the impact that you want to have with it?
Yeah. So, I have, I guess, 2 or 3 things that I really care about and that are the underlying values in what I'm doing and what I'm building. And this question of the women's revenue gap has been burning in me for a while now. So the blog post that you mentioned was kind of a moment when I felt compelled to really articulate that and kind of stake a claim in the ground. And I really want to be part of addressing that revenue gap. I feel like women in business, the moment is now. There's lots of attention being paid. There's lots of opportunity. But even so, one of the findings of some of the research I've looked at is that women report a lack of confidence around financing, investment, and money management. And that's one of the primary things that holds us back. And that's something that I can really get my hands on and do something about. So that's where I'm trying to invest my time and energy in terms of what I'm talking about, what I'm thinking about, what I'm doing in the world, is really identifying how to create tools and resources and opportunities to really get women to be comfortable with money and making financial decisions that they are confident in and proud of. That doesn't mean they always work out, but at least if you know you made a solid decision, you're not constantly second guessing yourself and undermining yourself. You're learning from it and moving on. So that's really important to me. I started this company focused on sustainability, and so that's still really core to my heart. I do a lot of work with companies that are in the sustainability world, and related to that, also food. I've been very active in supporting food businesses that are creating healthy and sustainable food products. So those are kind of like the content areas of where I work. But the measurable impact I'm looking for is really that the companies I work with are showing growth and profitability, growth in overall revenue and scale, and getting to that point where the business is providing sustainability, livelihood, opportunities in their community, whatever that community is, however they define it. That's what I'm looking for.
That's tremendous. So I want to go back to what you said about comfort with investing finance and money with women. I see this in male entrepreneurs too. So I'm really curious, in your experience, what are some of the tools that are most impactful for helping someone move to their next level of comfort in those areas?
Well, profit first is a game changer.
Yes, it is.
Let's just say that.
We have that commonality.
I read Profit First before there was such a thing as the Profit First professionals and started trying to use it and didn't do a very good job. So I was really excited to join the Profit First professionals community early on. I've been a PFP for more than 5 years. It's a great tool. It really helps give people structure for thinking about how they use cash in their business. So that's kind of a baseline. As I said, there are 5 fundamentals. I start with what's your destination? Where are you going? So that big picture thing we already talked about. Then the second piece is like making sure that you have your ducks in a row, that you have clean data, that you understand where your cash is coming from and going to, so that you have the controls in place that you're going to run a profitable company. And then I also really like to work on not just like a financial plan that's your annual budget, but backing up from that, what are the other metrics that are going to help you understand if you're making the right choices day to day in your business? So you're not just waiting for the end of the quarter to get your quarterly profit. You're looking day to day to see, am I making the right steps to get where I'm going? So one of the companies I work with is a pie shop, and I like to look at the end of the month, like, did you sell enough pies? It's really just that. And how many pies did you sell? And how many more do we need to sell? So breaking it down into really tangible, measurable goals is really important. And then the next layer of kind of this foundational stuff is your decision-making processes. So if you have a good decision-making process and people understand both what's the big picture strategy and the day-to-day tactics, they can be empowered to make decisions and everything doesn't have to come back to you, the owner.
Amen.
Amen. Because nobody can move without your input, then your business is not sustainable.
No, it's not.
And the converse, I've had an experience recently where I worked with a company where the CEO was confident in handing off some big chunks of decision-making to one of his department leads, but it didn't work out very well. And so they had a down year. And it took them 9 months to catch it, right? Because they were so diffused in kind of how their decision-making was going that they weren't actually on top of the effects of it. So there's a counterbalance to that where you have to be monitoring and holding people accountable as well as kind of diffusing that responsibility.
So was that because some of the metrics were not in place to catch any problems that were coming from the decision-making? Was that a part of it, or?
It was complicated. But I would say that basically, when you set a budget for the year, it's not etched in stone. It should be something that you're revisiting time and again. So if you make a choice to invest in growth, but then the revenue doesn't actually grow, guess what? That's going to cost you. So you need to be continuously monitoring. And that's just why the KPIs, that key performance indicator kind of check-ins on a regular basis, are really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So, you mentioned Profit First as being an important tool to start with. And I thought I would go back and share a similar story for myself with Profit First and why I started using it, because it ties right in to what we're talking about here. My business was growing and I had talked to a personal financial advisor and he had told me to invest all this extra money in my retirement account. But then I couldn't invest in the platforms and tools that I needed to grow my business. My retirement account looked great, but my business wasn't. I couldn't grow it. And I thought there have to be some guidelines about how to utilize this money coming into the business effectively. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And I just happened to be around Mike Michalowicz and I kind of pulled him aside and I said, I've got this problem and I don't know. Do you know any solution? And that's when he took out his napkin and he started drawing out the Profit First system for me. And I was really hesitant because I've always been a good saver. And I thought, I don't know if I need all these accounts and this feels a little complicated. But Mike said, just trust me, go try it. And Christine, I kid you not, within 4 months, my business finances looked different, felt different. And I joke because since then I have never felt rich in my business. And it's because there's never a big amount of money sitting in any single account. Things are properly allocated. So previously when I had felt rich, I was putting all that money in my retirement account that needed to go to taxes because I ended up with a big tax bill that year. So, just these basic tools like Profit First can have a big impact on us being able to just get our hands around what we need to use the money for in our business and how to be more strategic. So I really like what you said about, that's just a basic tool to start building financial knowledge and competence. I want to talk about the piece that you were getting into also around your vision around social impact, because as we were coming on the call before we started recording, I said, one of the things I want to pick your brain about, Christine, is at Tap the Potential, we want to start doing charitable giving from profit. And you said, I like to take that from a different angle. And I really like the perspective that you shared on that. So tell us a little bit about what social impact means and the distinction between that and charitable giving and how some ways we might be thinking about these in our business.
Sure. So I like to look at social impact business as being one where the desired social impact is actually structured into your business model and into your operational structure. So it's a question of how you can give back or contribute to that social impact even before you start thinking about having enough cash in the bank to give any away. And so for some companies, it might be more obvious. One of the companies I work with is a solar installation company. Every job they do is contributing to their social mission, which is to reduce carbon emissions by creating more renewable energy. This is a slam dunk. This is great, right? Because you just want to see this business grow, because everything they do is leading to a better world. So that would be like the ideal situation. Now, many of us start with an idea of a passion in our business, and maybe there's nothing intrinsically about your business that's going to be making the world a better place. So in that case, you want to look at what it is you have to offer, what are the impacts that are important to you, and how are those can they be woven seamlessly into what you do? So for me, I participate as a mentor in the City of New York's Women's Entrepreneurship Program, in several food-related accelerator programs. All of this is work that I do to support young, growing companies that aren't going to afford my services now or possibly in the future, but I can help them to be successful early on by giving of my time and knowledge. And it costs me nothing, basically, except a little bit of time. So that's just one example where if you can structure a relationship, a community, a participation in something that is meaningful to you and meaningful to your company, but that isn't draining your resources and doesn't require cash, to me, that is far more significant than a cash donation, because a cash donation is really a hands-off kind of relationship. It's not as direct. It's not as material. It can be very, very helpful. There are some situations like, I can't do anything about the fires in Australia right now. I could give some money. When there's a big disaster somewhere, that's an excellent use of charitable money. There are some social problems that are not going to be solved by volunteering. There absolutely needs to be money put into, feeding people, housing people, people who are in dire straits. So I'm not saying charity is bad. I'm just saying that from a business perspective, it's really helpful to think about like what your business is contributing to your community, however you define that, and how can you do more of that within the structure of the business.
I love that. It reminds me of when I was just me in the business. One of the things that I was not able to do was to give to charitable donations from the business, but I did give of my time. And I love the People Map. And I used to volunteer to do People Map training for a leadership organization. Once a month, I would go and train all of their classes going through on the People Map. And this is what I experience myself is when I give of my gifts, it gives me energy back, like it fills me back up, which is very different than when I give money. I feel good for a brief period of time, like I wrote that check. How that feels good to do that. But it's not as sustaining personally as the feeling that I get when I give of my gifts and I'm interactive and involved. And, at Tap the Potential, we have an immutable law about be a gift from our gifts. We seek to add value to our communities and our clients, everything that we're doing through our personal gifts and the things that we've been blessed with. So I really love hearing, in my mind, I had not merged these two. I was feeling like we need to be doing some charitable giving of the profits, which we will be doing. But it's also got me thinking we can be even more intentional around how can we be giving back from our gifts. We have not exhausted our capacity there. We have capacity.
Yeah. And it's also a great way of giving other people in your team the opportunity to think about their gifts and how they allocate them. And I would just encourage you also to track that, because if you measure it, you'll notice what happens as a result of that initiative. If you just say, go off and do this, and there's no way of reporting on it, then it may or may not happen, but you won't be accountable for it.
So I love that too. So measure the impact.
Measure the impact.
So what would that look like? What's an example?
So you could measure volunteer hours. You can measure, if you create a mentoring relationship with somebody over time, you can measure the impact on that company over time. If you provide a certain number of paid time off hours to your employees to participate in volunteer projects, then that's cash value that your business is actually giving to a different company or a different organization. There's lots of ways to measure it.
So this has my wheels turning. I think we're going to be putting a KPI in place around one of our immutable laws. I've never really thought about doing that.
Yes.
That is cool. Okay. All right. So the other thing that I think you can really bring that our profit designers would be very curious to know about. We hear the term CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and outsourced CFO. Sometimes we're not real sure what that means. What does a CFO in a business do? And then what does a part-time outsourced CFO do? And what's the distinction?
So every business needs, without fail, a way to keep track of your money coming in, money going out, where's it all going, and is it being used appropriately? That's the basic bookkeeper and maybe controller function, controlling that the money is being used to the benefit of the business and in accordance with tax laws. Great, lovely. You could have a high-level accountant who's doing more than that, who's helping to create budgets, but usually you're still very focused on looking backwards, what happened in the past, and maybe looking forward 12 months, like what's going to happen in the next year. What a CFO does that's a little bit different is really help the business plan not just the immediate future, but the foreseeable future, maybe 5 years out. So that's why having a destination is so important. And also connect all of the kind of financial side of the business to the more strategic goals of the company. So if you have a plan in the food world, distribution is the key to success. You got to get to lots of places if you want to make any money. So if you're adding a distribution channel, what does that mean? How much cash do you need to be able to enter that new market? What do you need for marketing? What do you need in terms of sales representation? What are all of the factors related to that decision that you should consider before you say yes? That's the role of a CFO. Some of those questions can be answered by different people in a business, but when a business and a lot of times, as an owner, you're trying to make these decisions on your own. And even, owners with an MBA will get to a point where you can't do it all yourself anymore. And that's the point at where you want somebody whose job is to really be overseeing the financial health of the business and understanding the implications of the decisions you want to make before you get too far into them.
So at what point is there a revenue mark where people typically start looking for CFO services?
So this is actually a complicated question, because different kinds of businesses will run into this problem at different points, right? So in a consulting company where your primary drivers of success are, the people on your team, you might run into this question under $500,000, right? About 150, 250, 300, you're doing fine. Somewhere around $500,000, it's starting to feel a lot more complicated. The next level of person you add, who should it be? What are the accountabilities for that? Maybe it's $1 million, but certainly in that frame somewhere. For a product-based business or a company that's trying to do project-based accounting, like a construction company or my solar installation company, if you have good bookkeeping, you could probably get beyond $1 million before you need that level of support. So it really depends on the company, on what you're trying to do, how your books are managed. There's a lot of factors involved. I try to provide the kind of ongoing support as the CFO, part-time CFO in a business at $1 million or more. Under $1 million, I feel like there's CFO support that I can give in a more targeted fashion without the business having to incur that kind of ongoing expense.
Mm-hmm. So what is the difference between hiring a CFO in your company and working with someone like you who works with multiple companies and you're coming in as a contractor?
Yeah, again, I think it gets to the kind of financial structure and complexity of the business and when you would want to have that resource internally. I feel like, if companies are trying to raise VC funding, the VCs are probably going to want an internal CFO sooner than you would if you're trying to grow more organically. So that's one distinction. But I would expect most of the companies I work with somewhere between 5 and 10 million to say, okay, it's worth hiring somebody internally because you can be a little more streamlined in terms of the various financial functions if you have somebody in-house managing them.
This has been a very enlightening discussion, Christine. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Entrepreneurs Take Your Life Back Facebook community at tapthepotential.com/group. Share your aha moments from today's episode, ask me questions, and join in on the fun with your fellow entrepreneurs on the journey to designing sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. And finally, share today's episode with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this. If you're loving the Profit by Design podcast and have gotten any value out of it for your business or your life, would you mind doing 2 things? Subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode, and please leave us a review. Our listener reviews help us get into the top 10 of all entrepreneurship podcasts so that more entrepreneurs like you discover us. Your review is critical in helping us make a difference for more entrepreneurs who are ready to take their life back.